In 1870, a 31-year-old in Cleveland, Ohio, held 4% of America's oil refining, a sliver, a foothold. By 1880, he held 90%, almost everything. By 1904, he controlled 91% of oil production and 85% of final sales. One man, one method, one blueprint. His name was John D. Rockefeller. The structures he built did not vanish when Standard Oil was broken in 1911. They adapted, they learned. They spread, and they shape the choices you make in 2025. The gasoline you pump, the drugs you buy, the tech platforms you cannot quit, the food on your table, the bank that holds your mortgage, every single one follows the same script. The Rockefeller playbook: vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, regulatory capture, tax-exempt foundations guiding the conversation. Dominance so complete that competition stops being a game and becomes a fantasy. This is not an industry story, this is an operating system. Rockefeller did not just build an oil empire, he built the architecture of modern corporate control. Why does it feel inescapable? Because the system is not Standard Oil. The system is the method. Methods do not die. They replicate, they refine, they hide in plain sight. For 150 years, Amazon uses it, Google uses it, Pfizer uses it, JP Morgan uses it, different logos, same blueprint. Control the supply chain vertically, eliminate rivals horizontally, shape the rules before the rules shape you, buy respect with philanthropy. And when the hammer finally falls and the government breaks you apart, make sure the pieces you still influence are worth more than the whole. Think like the architect. First, take control of the path from raw input to the final customer. Fewer middlemen, fewer unknowns, fewer surprises. Costs drop, reliability rises, dependence flips. They depend on you. Then look sideways. Competitors become acquisitions. Partnerships become absorptions. What does that do to the market? It squeezes oxygen. It changes psychology. The upstart feels the walls closing in. Investors feel the fear. They back away. Panic does the rest. Why does this happen? Because markets run on stories as much as on numbers. A dominant player sets the story. Lower prices appear benevolent. Better distribution appears convenient. But the story behind the story is control. Once control is set, prices can move at will. Choices shrink. Power concentrates. Do you see the pattern? Now capture the referees. Not by breaking rules, by writing them. Hire the experts, fund the studies, sit on the advisory boards. Make complexity your moat. When regulations arrive, you are already compliant. Smaller rivals drown in paperwork, you file it with a smile. And what about public anger? You soften it. You build tax-exempt foundations. You fund hospitals, schools, and research. You pose with ribbon-cutting scissors. Philanthropy becomes a shield. How could a villain do so much good? Legitimacy is not free. It is purchased. It is strategic. It pays dividends you cannot see on a balance sheet. Then comes the moment everyone fears, the breakup. Headlines scream. Investors tremble. You plan for it. You seeded the parts. You position the pieces. Some of the parts can be greater than the whole when the parts are suddenly visible, tradable, and loved. The market rewards clarity. The founders' holdings appreciate. The empire lives on in fragments that move together like a school of fish. Control without the target on the back. That is how the richest man in history became richer after the supposed defeat. This is why 114 years after that breakup, you still live inside Rockefeller's design. The names changed, the sectors multiplied. The game did not. Every time you enjoy a convenient bundle, ask yourself, is this vertical control in disguise? Every time a rival disappears, ask, was this horizontal consolidation with a smile? Every time a new rule arrives that only the giants can afford to follow, ask, who wrote this rule? And when a corporation donates a fortune, ask, what story just got rewritten? As an investor, feel your own pulse in this. Greed whispers when dominance promises safety. Fear shouts when regulators knock. Panic pushes you to sell the very day the architect quietly buys. The blueprint exploits human nature, impulse, FOMO, relief. Every sudden drop becomes a transfer of wealth from the anxious to the prepared. Do you recognize that pattern in yourself? Understanding this is not academic, it is survival. The system is engineered to extract wealth from the many and concentrate it at the top. Not with drama, with routine, not with force, with process. With patience, with inevitability. Once you learn to spot the moves, vertical control, horizontal removal, regulatory embrace, philanthropic polish, breakup alchemy, you cannot unsee them. You will see them at the pump, at the pharmacy, in your apps, in your wallet. So here's the path we will walk. How Rockefeller built the system. How that method forged the richest fortune, how the breakup multiplied his power, and why, in 2025, the same blueprint still governs your choices. Watch closely, train your eye. Because once you see how it works, you will see it everywhere. And once you see it everywhere, you stop playing their game on autopilot. You start playing it on purpose. John Davidson Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York. His father was a con man who sold fake cancer cures. His mother was a devout Baptist. Two forces, steel and scripture, the con man's ruthlessness. The Baptist's moral certainty. Together they forged a mind that could cut like a blade and pray with absolute conviction. He would destroy competitors without mercy, and he would believe sincerely that God had chosen him to organize industry for the betterment of mankind. Paradox? Not to him. This wasn't hypocrisy. This was faith welded to logic. He believed his monopoly was moral, order replacing chaos, efficiency squeezing out waste. A system where mess once ruled, he saw it as service, ruthless service. In Titusville, Pennsylvania, in 1859, oil was discovered. Then came the oil rush. Thousands of prospectors flooded into western Pennsylvania. Men chasing a dream with mud on their boots. Fortunes made and lost overnight. Greed flashing into panic. Euphoria into despair. It was chaos. Boom and bust. Overproduction crushed prices. Then shortages spiked them. Up, down, up again. You could hear the whiplash in every trade. Rockefeller was 20 years old. A bookkeeper in Cleveland, quiet, watching. He saw the madness. He saw the coin toss that drilling had become. Drilling was volatile, risky, dependent on luck. He had no interest in luck. He liked numbers. He liked control. He liked processes that could be measured, tightened, perfected. He saw opportunity not in drilling, but in refining. Turn crude oil into kerosene for lamps. Predictable demand, repeatable steps, real business. In 1863, he invested $4,000 in his first oil refinery in Cleveland. Slow voice, steady hand. Within 2 years, it was the largest refinery in Cleveland, but Cleveland had 30 refineries, 30 fires burning, each fighting for breath. Competition was fierce. Margins were thin. Most refineries lived at the edge of bankruptcy. Owners counting coins by lamplight. Praying the next shipment would pay the last bill. Fear in every invoice. This is where his genius emerged. He did not try to compete on price. He tried to make competition irrelevant. He refused the knife fight. He changed the rules of the game. How? Vertical integration. Control every stage of production, not one step, all the steps. Most refineries just refined. They bought crude from drillers. They turned it into kerosene. They sold it to distributors. One narrow link in a long chain, fragile, dependent, exposed. Rockefeller saw the weakness. He decided to own the chain. He decided to own the risk. He bought the barrel-making factories. No middleman. No surprise shortages. No sudden price hikes. Every barrel the same. Every seam tight. Waste cut to the bone. Pennies saved at scale become power. Do you see the pattern? He bought tank cars and railroads to ship his own oil, not begging for space, not waiting on someone else's schedule. Speed became a choice. Price became a lever. When you own the path, you own the pace. Why haggle when you can own? This was more than strategy. It was psychology. He hated randomness. He hunted it down and replaced it with systems, discipline over drama. When prices crashed from overproduction, others panicked. He kept refining. He kept improving. He bought when fear made assets cheap. When shortages spiked prices, he didn't gasp. He shipped. He delivered. He turned volatility into opportunity because he had reduced the unknowns. He squeezed uncertainty out of every step he could touch, and he believed it was right, not showy, not loud, quiet conviction. He prayed on Sunday. He negotiated on Monday. He saw waste as a moral failure. He saw inefficiency as a sin against progress. Organize it, standardize it, bring order. If a competitor stood in the way, remove the obstacle. Mercy was not the mission. Improvement was. Cleveland felt the pressure. 30 refineries facing a player who did not play the usual game. Rivals cut prices and bled. He cut waste and grew stronger. Rivals waited for luck. He built processes that made luck irrelevant. They chased the next spike. He built a machine that didn't care about spikes. This is how monopolies are born, not by shouting, by building. Deeper roots, broader reach, control of inputs, control of outputs. Control of movement between. Vertical integration was the foundation of a new kind of power in corporate America, a model many would try to copy. Few with his patience, fewer with his certainty. Why does this happen? Because markets reward stability in a storm. Because fear, greed, and panic destroy the undisciplined. He watched those emotions burn through others. He used them. He kept his ledger straight. He kept his faith straight. To him, organizing chaos was not just profitable, it was noble. Remember the picture. A 20-year-old bookkeeper staring at a world of booms and busts. He chooses the quiet path, refining over drilling, systems over bets, ownership over negotiation. Step by step, he takes the chain in his hands, order over chaos, efficiency over waste, and then he never lets go. He buys the warehouses, not rents, buys. He takes control of storage. He buys the distribution networks too. He wants the path to the customer. Direct, no middlemen. Every step that used to feed someone else, he pulls it inside his walls. One system, one command. Why? Because cost is a weapon. Because dependency is a leash. And he refuses to wear one. Competitors pay other people for everything. Barrel makers. Railroads. Brokers. Each one wants a cut. Each cut is blood from the same vein. Rockefeller sees it. He hates waste the way a surgeon hates infection. While others pay 25 cents per barrel to outside barrel makers, he builds his own shop. His cost, 15 cents. That 10-cent gap is not small. It is breathing room in a knife fight. It is the difference between a bad quarter and a price war. While others line up at the railroad office, hat in hand, Rockefeller rolls his own tank cars onto the rails. He negotiates secret rebates. Quiet promises, silent math. The railroads pay him to ship his oil and charge his rivals more. Read that again. They pay him and they squeeze the rest. Efficiency? Sure. But do not miss the edge. This is predatory elegance. It is a velvet glove over a steel hammer. Now imagine the shelf at the general store. 2 tins of kerosene, same gleam, same light at night. His price falls like a trap door. He can sell low and still make money. Others cannot. They bleed on every sale. Fear shows up first as a whisper. Then a tremor in the hand, then panic. Competitors stare at their ledgers and feel the walls closing in. How long can they last? Weeks? Days? They know the answer. Their bankers know it too. By 1870, he formalizes the machine, Standard Oil Company of Ohio. A simple name for an empire in blueprint. His refinery capacity has grown from one small plant to the largest refining operation on the planet. Read that again. From one to the largest, but inside the mind of a builder, size is not control. He still holds only 4% of American refining. 4% is not dominance, it is a beachhead, and a beachhead is not a home. So he shifts to phase 2, horizontal integration. You have heard the terms. Vertical is the supply chain. Control the inputs, the process, the delivery. Horizontal is different. It is the battlefield of peers. Buy them or break them. Why does this happen? Because once you own the cost structure, you can set the price of pain. Because once you bend the rails, everyone else rides your track. 1872, Cleveland. 3 months that feel like a lifetime to the men who own those refineries. Historians call it the Cleveland Massacre. The name fits. But it did not start with explosions. It started with quiet meetings, invitations to talk, a chair, a cup of coffee, a pen on the table. Rockefeller makes his offer. Fair market value, cash, not promises. Keep your pride, keep your job. Often he hires them as managers. He gives them security, dignity, a path out. Some accept. Relief floods the room, the fear drains. They pick up the pen and sign, others refuse. Pride flares, anger too. They think, I can outlast him, I can cut costs, I can fight. Then the price drops again, lower, below cost. Every sale is a loss. Their workers come asking about pay, their creditors call, their nights stretch long and sleepless. You feel it? The squeeze? That is not random, that is design. They have two choices, sell to Rockefeller or go bankrupt. Most sell, a few fight, they all lose. Not because they lack courage, because their math is wrong, because his system is built for the long war. They bring emotion to a numbers battle. He brings numbers to an emotional storm. That is the difference. By the end of 1872, the scoreboard is brutal. Rockefeller controls 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries, from 4% of American refining to 25%. And it happens in 3 months that redraw the map. Do you see the pattern now? The friendly handshake first. The invisible blade second, offer to buy. If they refuse, destroy them economically, then buy the ruins for less. This was not a one-off. It was a blueprint, a method that echoes through industry after industry for the next 150 years. Executives study it in whispers. Investors feel its gravity, politicians chase its shadow. The psychology is always the same, fear and greed pulling at the same heart. The fear of losing everything, the greed for a clean exit. Rockefeller did not argue with either. He harnessed both. Remember this when markets turn ruthless. Price is a story, cost is the truth. Those who own the costs write the ending. Those who rent their advantages become characters in someone else's plot. And when the offer comes, when the price cuts turn your stomach to stone, that is not an accident, that is strategy, sharpened to a point. Rockefeller wasn't satisfied with Cleveland. A single city felt small. He wanted the whole map, the rails, the rivers, the ports, the nation. Through the 1870s, he pushed Standard Oil across America. Not with noise, with method. He bought refineries in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. He walked into each market like a surgeon. Same tools, same cuts, same result. He squeezed the railroads for secret rebates, quiet agreements, inside deals. His barrels moved cheaper. Competitors paid full fare. That difference bled them slowly, and he smiled because costs are a weapon. He drove vertical integration like a wedge. Every stage under control, no middlemen, no surprises, input, process, output, predictable, repeatable, cheaper than anyone. Why fight on price when you can make price your slave? And when someone refused to sell, he turned to war. Ruthless price wars, markets flooded. Margins crushed, rivals watched cash burn. Nights got longer, loans came due. Pride wilted, fear took over. Do you see the pattern? He didn't just beat you. He made you choose between surrender and extinction. By the end of 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's refining capacity. 90%. Let that sit for a second. That's not competition. That's command. That's not a business. That's a monopoly. But here's where his real genius showed. He understood what most moguls ignore. Monopolies come with two problems. First, the law. The Sherman Antitrust Act would arrive in 1890, written with men like him in mind. A sword hanging over his empire. Second, the crowd. Public anger, op-eds, cartoons. He was called a robber baron, a tyrant, the most hated man in America. Hate is a tax. It invites prosecutors. It invites politicians. It invites chaos. So he needed a shield, a cleaner shape, a structure that cooled the heat and dodged the net. He found it. The trust. In 1882, his lawyers built the Standard Oil Trust. Watch the move. Standard Oil of Ohio could not legally own companies across state lines, but a trust could hold stock. A trust could sit above the fray. It could control everything without looking like it owned anything. He gathered the pieces, different Standard Oil entities under one umbrella. Stock handed to the trust, control centralized, day-to-day stayed local, strategy stayed singular, precision without exposure. 41 shareholders, all Rockefeller and his closest allies, held the trust. The trust held the companies held the market. Simple. Elegant. Devastating. Why does this matter? Because structure beats force. Because control without visibility is the ultimate edge. This was the first major corporate trust in American history, and the imitators lined up: Sugar Trust, Tobacco Trust, Steel Trust. They all copied the skeleton. They saw what he built and said, "We want that." The trust let Rockefeller run a nationwide monopoly while technically complying with state laws. Read that again, technically. He played inside the lines by moving the lines, and something bigger happened too. The trust created a new kind of beast. It wasn't a factory. It wasn't a shop floor. It produced nothing. It owned everything. A holding entity, a parent that raises, disciplines, and directs its children. That idea evolved into the modern corporation. The parent with subsidiaries, central brain, distributed hands. You see it today. Berkshire Hathaway. Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, different eras, same logic. Control the structure, win the game. So what did the rivals feel? Panic. What did the public feel? Anger. What did Rockefeller feel? Calm. He wasn't chasing price, he was designing power. And once you design power, the market stops being a storm. It becomes a system. Your system. They are all descendants of Rockefeller's trust. That is the root, the bloodline, the system that kept paying out long after the headlines faded. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining in America and 85% of final sales. That is not a market. That is gravity. When one company pulls like that, everything else orbits. Rockefeller was the richest man in the world. His net worth was $900 million. In today's money, that is about $25 billion. But that was just the surface, paper wealth. A reflection in the glass. At his peak in 1913, the inflation-adjusted figure swells to $400 billion. More than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates combined. The richest individual in modern history. Let that sink in. One man, one system. How did he build it? Not by gambling, not by luck, by structure, vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, legal architecture that concentrated control. Every move tightened the grip. Every contract, every holding company, every board seat. It was methodical, cold, relentless. This was the system. But the public mood was shifting. Power like that makes people uneasy. It sparks stories. It builds fear. Why does this happen? Because when one player wins too much, everyone else starts counting losses. The anger spreads. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, a line in the sand. Monopolies were now illegal. The law arrived before the story caught fire, but the story was coming. In 1906, investigative journalist Ida Tarbell published The History of the Standard Oil Company. She took readers into the engine room. She showed the gears, secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing, crushing competitors with a calm smile. She did not scream, she documented. And the outcry was enormous. Think like an investor in that moment. Headlines every day, hearings, editorials. The word monopoly spat like a curse. Fear takes over, panic whispers, sell, protect what's left. That is how crowds think. That is how money runs. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly. It ordered the company broken into 34 separate companies. To most people, that sounded like an ending, the fall of a giant, the destruction of the system. But that is not what happened. It was the beginning of the system's evolution. Because when Standard Oil was broken up, Rockefeller still owned shares in all 34 companies. Read that again. Control dissolved on paper. Ownership remained in his hands. The pieces scattered. The value did not. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Standard Oil of Ohio turned into a regional powerhouse, later bought by BP. The family tree did not die. It branched. Here's the twist that most miss. The breakup did not destroy Rockefeller's wealth. It multiplied it. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was worth about $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of all 34 companies climbed to over $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's wealth effectively tripled. Why? Because pressure forces change. Competition inside the family drove innovation and efficiency. Managers had to prove themselves, regions had to hustle. The pieces fought for market share, and the machine got faster. And because breaking one monopoly into 34 companies that still dominated their regional markets was not true fragmentation. Call it what you want. The center was gone. The edges were sharp. Dominance stayed, just distributed. Do you see the pattern? The crowd sees chaos and sells. The builder sees structure and holds. Fear looks at headlines. Discipline looks at cap tables. Panic hears noise. Patience hears cash flow. This is the psychology that separates outcomes. Greed chases the first monopoly. Fear flees the first lawsuit. Wisdom holds the shares through both. Rockefeller did not fight the tide. He repositioned his ship. He let the law redraw the map. Then he owned the map makers. That is the lesson hidden in plain sight. Systems do not end, they adapt. Value slips into new containers. Control rewrites its contracts. If you only watch the surface, you miss the transfer underneath. When a story feels like an ending, ask a harder question. Who still owns the pieces? Who benefits from the forced change? Where does the cash flow migrate? The answer is often the same: the patient owner, the one who built the system in the first place. The trust dissolved, the shares multiplied, the wealth compounded, the public cheered the fall. Rockefeller watched the branches grow. It wasn't destroying the empire, it was reorganizing it, splitting the pieces, letting the pressure cool, then waiting. Most of those 34 companies, they drifted back together deal by deal, decade by decade. Exxon and Mobil rejoined in 1999. Chevron swallowed Standard Oil of Kentucky and Gulf Oil. BP bought Amoco in Ohio. The monopoly broken in 1911 reconsolidated in slow motion into three giants: Exxon Mobil, Chevron, and BP. The system broke itself up to dodge the hammer. Then, over 100 years, it quietly put itself back together. No fireworks, no headlines. Just patience, just structure. But Standard Oil's most enduring legacy isn't a logo or a pipeline. It's the system, the methods, the structures. The playbook, that is what survived. That is what compounds. You still see it everywhere. Look at Amazon. Vertical integration, Rockefeller style. It started as an online bookstore, a thin sliver of the chain. Then it kept moving upstream and downstream. Now it owns the warehouses, the logistics network, the last-mile delivery trucks, the payment rails, even the cloud that hosts its competitors' websites. Think about that. The shelf, the store, the highway, the cash register, the server farm, all inside one fortress. Amazon Web Services alone generates roughly $90 billion in annual revenue. That's more than the retail side earns in profit. Do you see the leverage? The cash engine sits behind the storefront. Hidden in plain sight, Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution. Amazon controls retail, logistics, and cloud computing. Same playbook, new century. Different tools, same idea, control the choke points. How does the market react? Investors feel the pull of certainty, the comfort of scale. Greed whispers, ride this growth. Regulators hesitate. Consumers cheer for speed and price. Competitors, they feel the squeeze first. They know what's coming, and Amazon doesn't stop at vertical control. It goes horizontal. It buys competitors, Whole Foods, Zappos, Twitch, Ring. MGM Studios, over 100 acquisitions. Each deal removes a threat, absorb the talent, absorb the customers, absorb the margins. Can't buy the rival, copy the product, undercut the price, use the data your marketplace collects. Third-party sellers hand over their sales metrics to Amazon every day. Amazon studies the patterns, spots the winners. Launches an Amazon Basics version, places it above the original, front row placement, better price, endless traffic. What happens to the small seller? At first, hope. Sales climb, then the chill, the copy appears, the price drops, the buy box moves, panic. Margins vanish. Inventory becomes a liability. This is Rockefeller's price war rebuilt for the internet. Legal, barely regulated. Devastatingly effective. Now look at Google. The trust structure lives on. Alphabet is a holding company. On top sits the parent. Beneath it, many operating companies: Google, YouTube, Waymo, DeepMind, Verily. Dozens more, one roof, many rooms, firewalled where needed. Aligned where it matters. Why organize this way? Flexibility, risk containment, tax efficiency, strategic clarity. The board sees the whole chessboard. Each subsidiary plays its position. The parent allocates capital like a refinery routes oil, where the return is highest, where the pressure is lowest. Do you see the pattern? The names change, the tools change, the incentives do not. Power flows to whoever controls the bottlenecks, whoever writes the rules of the network. Whoever can wage a price war longer than anyone else. Investors forget this. Fear of regulation makes them jumpy. Greed for growth makes them blind. They chase headlines, they miss the structure. The structure is the signal. Standard Oil's legacy is not a relic, it's executable code. Rockefeller wrote the pattern. Today's giants still run it, same bones, new skin. If you want to understand dominance, don't stare at the logos. Study the system, then ask yourself who owns the pipes, the rails, the servers, the data. That's where the power sits. That's where the story ends. Picture a simple org chart, a parent on top, a tangle of subsidiaries below. It looks boring. It is armor. This structure shields the parent from liability. It lets profits flow through jurisdictions where taxes whisper instead of shout. And when someone tries to break it up, the maze fights back. Each subsidiary is technically separate. Every line on that chart is a legal wall. Who do you sue? Which door do you knock on? Regulators hesitate. Investors shrug. Complexity wins. Pharmaceutical giants learned this from Rockefeller's deeper play. He did not just compete, he set the rules. He lobbied for railroad regulations that tilted the tracks towards Standard Oil. He worked with politicians to set kerosene standards his refineries could meet, and competitors could not. Why does this matter? Because if you define the test, you always pass it. Today, Big Pharma mirrors the move. They fund the FDA through user fees. They lobby for patent extensions. They draft the very regulations that supposedly govern them. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck. Students of the same school. Control the regulators and you control the market. Traders call it a moat, but this is not a moat of innovation. It is a moat of paperwork, process, and permits. Fear keeps rivals out. Greed keeps capital in. Do you see the pattern? Finance sharpened the blade with holding companies. JP Morgan Chase is a holding company that owns Chase Bank, JP Morgan Investment Bank, and numerous subsidiaries. Bank of America, Citigroup. Wells Fargo, all holding companies, one name on the glass, many entities underneath. Try to regulate that and the ground shifts. After 2008, Dodd-Frank tried to push rules through the thicket. The structure turned it into a guessing game. Which entity do you regulate? The parent or the subsidiaries? Pick wrong and nothing changes. Pick right and another entity steps forward. Regulators hesitate. Lawyers celebrate. Time passes. Pressure fades. Rockefeller solved this puzzle in 1882. Split control from operations. Keep the crown far from the mud. One entity at the top, many below. The risk spreads, the profits concentrate. Banks copied the solution 100 years later. Same play, different jerseys, complexity as shield, fragmentation as strategy. When fear hits the market, a web like this absorbs the shock. When greed returns, the web pulls in the gains. Panic exhausts the outsider. Patience rewards the architect. And then there is philanthropy, Rockefeller's final innovation. In 1913, he created the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial gift of $250 million, over $7 billion today. The foundation funded medical research, education, and public health. On the surface, charity, Rockefeller giving back. Look deeper. The foundation allowed him to avoid estate taxes. It put him in the chair that decides which universities receive the money, which means influence over what gets taught, what gets researched. It bought him legitimacy. The man who destroyed thousands of competitors was now a philanthropist. The most hated man in America became a beloved benefactor. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the creation of modern medical education. The story changed because the storyteller bought the stage. This is the architecture of power. Structure to shield, policy to tilt the field, philanthropy to soften the edges. Fear, greed, and panic, channeled, not avoided. That is how markets are won before the opening bell even rings. It funded Johns Hopkins. The University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, not as random gifts, as a blueprint, a new template for power. Medical schools followed. Labs over listening, pills over prevention, protocols over people. Why does this matter? Because incentives shape outcomes. If you fund the labs define the answers. If you reward the prescription becomes the cure. This is not conspiracy. This is documented history. The foundation set the frame. American medicine tilted toward the pharmaceutical model. And who won? Pharmaceutical companies, many descended from Standard Oil's old chemical divisions. They profited enormously, decade after decade. Do you see the pattern? A generation of doctors trained to reach for the bottle first. Not because they were evil, because the system nudged them. Grants nudge them. Prestige nudge them. Journals nudge them. When the map points one way, most people follow the road. Today, every billionaire knows this playbook. They do not guess, they execute. Bill Gates built the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. With roughly $75 billion in assets, it funds global health, it shapes WHO policy, it influences national governments, not by force. By grants, by partnerships, by the subtle gravity of money over time. Mark Zuckerberg launched the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Warren Buffett pledged most of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. What does that tell you? This is not just charity, it is tax avoidance. It is legacy building, it is policy influence, the triple crown of power, philanthropy as strategy, gifts as levers, endowments as engines. Rockefeller invented the model. Modern billionaires perfected it. They made it cleaner, smoother, more data-driven, but the core remains the same. Move upstream, set standards, fund the gatekeepers, then watch the river flow where you aimed it. The Rockefeller family never left the stage. They stayed quiet, but they stayed present. David Rockefeller, John D's grandson, died in 2017 at age 101. Chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, founder of the Trilateral Commission, one of the most powerful men in global finance for 50 years. Half a century of relationships, half a century of doors opened and closed. The family's wealth, estimated at $11 billion, sits in hundreds of trusts and foundations. The Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefeller Family Fund, the David Rockefeller Fund, different names, same function. They still shape policy. They still fund research. They still influence politics 150 years after John D. started Standard Oil. Think about that, a century and a half of continuity. Most companies do not survive a generation. This dynasty survived empires. And here's the part most people miss. The system is not designed to be escaped. It is designed to be invisible until you are already trapped. You think you are choosing. But the choices were curated. You buy gasoline refined by ExxonMobil or Chevron, corporate descendants of Standard Oil. The logos changed. The lineage did not. You buy from Amazon. That is vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, straight from Rockefeller's playbook. Control the rails, then control the cargo, then control the price. You search on Google. A modern trust in everything but name, structured with layers and moats. Scale as fortress, data as oil, attention as refinery, different era. Same logic, you take pharmaceuticals developed inside a medical system molded by foundation grants. The funding shaped the curriculum. The curriculum shaped the practice. The practice shaped your choices. You feel sick. The system hands you a script. You fill it. Who made that script inevitable? Why does this happen? Because fear and desire move markets. Fear of taxes, desire for legacy, fear of irrelevance. Desire for control. These are human levers. The richest people on earth pull them with precision. Do you see the pattern now? Money sets the rules. Endowments set the tempo. Institutions march in time. And you, the consumer, the voter, the patient, live inside the music. The notes were written long before you pressed play. You bank with institutions built on Rockefeller's holding company skeleton. You swipe, you transfer, you borrow. The organs look modern, the bones are old. The structure is the point, layers on layers. Subsidiaries inside subsidiaries. Control without fingerprints. Your taxes fund regulators. Sounds comforting, right? Watch closer. The rules are drafted by the industries being regulated. Drafted in their language, designed for their needs. Loopholes as features. Why does this happen? Because insiders sit at the table. Because they have the lawyers. Because complexity is a moat. You pay for the watchdog. The watchdog takes commands from the kennel. The system feeds itself, self-perpetuating, self-protecting. It concentrates wealth. It locks rivals out. It captures the referees, and then it buys legitimacy. A museum wing, a university chair, a foundation with a halo. The tax bill shrinks. The applause grows. You see the trick yet? This is the Rockefeller system, not a conspiracy, no smoke-filled room required. It is corporate structure, legal, clean, tidy in the paperwork, copied and taught, replicated by every dominant player in every major industry. Because it works, because investors reward it, because stability pays, greed loves predictability, fear hates uncertainty. Do you feel that pull? Try to buy oil outside the descendants of Standard Oil. Try. Different logos, same family tree, upstream, midstream, downstream. The pipeline flows to the same routes. You stand at the pump and think you have choice. Do you? Try to avoid Amazon's logistics network. Even if you never click buy, the supply chain wraps around you, warehouses, carriers, delivery routes. The infrastructure is theirs. The margins are theirs. Step outside and the ground still belongs to them. Try to opt out of pharmaceutical medicine shaped by Rockefeller grants. The grants seeded the framework, curricula, research priorities, institutional tone. You meet a doctor, you read a study, you fill a prescription. The lineage lingers. You feel safe because it is scientific. That feeling was curated. Try to escape the banking system built on the holding company model. Bank holding, service company, holding data provider. Each layer clips a fee. Each layer adds compliance that only giants can afford. You live inside it. You pay for the privilege every single day. And where does the flow go? Up. Always up. Concentrated at the top, exactly as Rockefeller designed it to do in 1870. That was the insight. Build the structure, not just the product. Build the machine that outlives you. Here's what makes Rockefeller different from other robber barons. Carnegie built steel mills, icons of smoke and fire. When he died, the mills kept running, but his personal grip ended. Vanderbilt built railroads, tracks from ocean to river. When he died, the lines kept rolling, but the network fragmented. J.P. Morgan built financial empires, deals, syndicates, banking houses. When he died, his partners carried on, but his dominance faded. Rockefeller built a system. Systems don't die with their creators. Systems evolve. They adapt, they spread, they are habits encoded in law, incentives sculpted into policy, they become the default setting. Standard Oil was broken up in 1911. Headlines cheered, but the model had already replicated vertical integration as a playbook. The trust became the holding company, central control without open consolidation. Regulatory capture put on a suit and called itself lobbying. Handshakes turned into revolving doors. Philanthropy became foundations. Endowments with mission statements and tax shields. Do you see the pattern? Every piece was copied, refined, and embedded. Corporate law baked it in. Tax code rewarded it. Regulatory frameworks codified it. The result? A game where the rules and the players share the same boardroom language. Scale wins, power compounds, competition becomes performance art. Rockefeller died in 1937. The man vanished. The structure remained. In fact, it grew stronger. Why? Because it was never about him. It was never about personality. It was architecture. Replace the faces, keep the scaffolding. The outcomes don't change. Let me show you the mechanism, not the myth, the mechanism that extracts wealth from you. You need gasoline. You have a choice, or so it looks. Different station, different brand, same integrated ladder behind the sign. The oil came from a field controlled by a holding. It moved through a pipeline licensed by a holding. It was refined in a plant owned by a holding. By the time you lift the pump, the path is set. Your decision feels personal. It is not. Your dollars climb the structure quietly, efficiently, predictably. Why does this persist? Because your fear craves safety, your greed craves return. You reward the firms that promise both. They promise control. They deliver margins. And the system, patient and polite, collects its tolls every day from everyone, including you, Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell, different logos. Same playbook, price-coordinated oligopolies descended from Standard Oil or copying its methods with religious discipline. You think you're choosing. You're not. You're selecting branches from the same old tree. You need to buy things, everyday things. So you open the big doors of modern retail. Amazon, Walmart, Target. Amazon dominates through vertical integration. Control the stack, squeeze the margins, own the rails. Walmart and Target must match that scale or die trying. Same system, different uniforms. You see aisles and websites. They see pipes and tolls. Who do you think gets paid? You need search. Everyone does. One engine rules them all. Google holds 92% market share, higher than Standard Oil's peak of 91%. Read that again, higher than Rockefeller's apex. Yet regulators shrug. Why? Because it's free. You do not pay with dollars, you pay with data, with your attention, with your habits. Rockefeller would have loved this innovation, a monopoly so complete that users do not even realize they're paying. It feels like a gift. It behaves like a tax. You need social connection, so you tap an app. Facebook has 3 billion users. Instagram, also Facebook. WhatsApp, also Facebook. You are not choosing platforms. You are choosing which meta property will capture your time today. Horizontal consolidation. Exactly like Rockefeller. Own the lanes, own the traffic, own the options. Then let people think they picked the route. You need healthcare. You see a doctor trained inside a system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You receive pharmaceuticals from firms using patents, regulations, and corporate structures pioneered by Standard Oil's chemical divisions. You pay insurance companies built on Rockefeller's corporate architecture. Every hallway leads back to the same logic. Cut out rivals. Lock in distribution. Extract. Picture the day. You wake. You check your feed. Meta. You search. Google. You add to cart. Amazon. You drive to work. Oil, you book a checkup, the doctor, the pill, the insurer, all nested inside a framework that traces to the same template. Do you see the pattern? The names change, the structure does not. Every step, extraction, every choice, an illusion. Not a conspiracy, a system. It rewards scale. It punishes the small. It amplifies fear and greed. Executives feel the pressure, miss a quarter, lose your chair, so they consolidate. They integrate, they defend moats. Consumers feel the convenience, the low prices, the speed, so they comply, little by little, click by click. That is how power compounds. Run the math. The average American spends $4,000 per year on gasoline, $3,000 per year on Amazon, $5,000 per year on healthcare beyond insurance, $4,200 per year on internet and technology services. That is $13,200 every year flowing to companies using Rockefeller's system. Over a lifetime, that is $660,000 of wealth transfer, not to innovative startups, not to small businesses on the corner, to monopolistic corporations using 150-year-old tactics to eliminate competition and extract maximum profit. Can you escape it? You could refuse to buy gasoline, but you need to work. Work requires transportation. You could refuse to use Amazon. But the pricing, the speed, the convenience, they make avoidance feel like self-harm. The system knows your thresholds. It presses exactly there. Why does this happen? Because scale rewires incentives. Because free is never free. Because the oldest trick in business is to reduce the number of doors and charge rent on every exit. And here you are, standing in a maze that looks like a marketplace. Convinced you are choosing, while the tree decides where the branches grow. You can refuse Google. Delete it from your phone. Swear you are done. But what replaces a search engine with 92% market share? You guess. Then you quietly reinstall it. Why does this happen? You can refuse Facebook. Announce you are leaving for good. But your family chats live on Meta's platforms, your neighborhood group, your kids' school updates, your business leads. You can walk away. But your social ties stay there. Do you see the pattern? You can refuse pharmaceutical medicine, say you will do it your own way. But your doctor's license, your insurance coverage, your hospital protocols, your pharmacy options, your cultural expectations, all trace back to the Rockefeller system. You arrive at the clinic with a belief. You leave with a prescription that fits the structure, not because the doctor is evil, because the rails are already laid. This is Rockefeller's ultimate achievement, not just that he became the richest man in history, that he built a system where escape feels pointless. Every path bends back to consolidated corporate control. Every fork looks like choice. But both roads are owned. Competition gets crushed before it becomes a threat. Startups feel it first. Investors feel it second. Consumers feel it last. Regulators guard incumbents, not citizens. Hearings happen. Headlines flare. Nothing fundamental shifts. Philanthropy buys credibility. Big checks fund causes that gently, elegantly keep the machine humming. This is the Rockefeller system. Whether you see it or not, you live inside it. You vote with your clicks, with your prescriptions, with your gas pump, with your attention. Here's the twist most people miss. The system is not evil, it is efficient. That is why it wins. Vertical integration reduces costs. Own every step. Extraction, transport, refining, distribution. No waste in the handoffs, no friction in the margins. Horizontal consolidation eliminates wasteful duplication. One giant replaces 10 small players. Fewer battles, fewer bankruptcies, less chaos. Regulatory capture provides stability. Rules get written. The biggest players help write them. Markets calm down. Investors exhale. Politicians claim order. Consumers get predictability. Foundations fund real research. Grants flow. Labs run. Breakthroughs happen. Yes, influence is purchased, but new knowledge appears. The good rides with the self-interest. The system works. You feel it every day. Products arrive cheaper, faster, more reliably than in chaotic markets. Standard Oil made kerosene affordable for average Americans. Before Standard Oil, kerosene cost 58 cents per gallon. After its efficiencies, 8 cents per gallon. An 86% price reduction. That is not exploitation. That is efficiency delivered at scale. A poor household goes from darkness to light. A teacher reads at night. A shop stays open an extra hour. The margin between struggle and possibility shifts. Amazon delivers in 2 days. You click. A cardboard box appears at your door. Time saved, gas saved, mind space saved. Google answers in seconds. A question forms. An answer appears, a student learns, a manager decides, a parent fixes a sink without calling anyone. ExxonMobil produces gasoline at scale. Roads fill, goods move, entire regions function. Pfizer develops life-saving drugs. A diagnosis that once meant a deadline becomes a plan. A life stretches longer, a family gets more time, value flows downward, efficiency reaches the bottom. That is real. That is measurable in your daily life. Here's the problem. The gains concentrate upward. The power pools at the top. You get cheaper goods, faster shipping, instant information, effective medicine. Rockefeller's heirs get trillions in accumulated wealth. Both can be true at once, and that duality toys with your psychology. Gratitude and resentment sit side by side. You love the convenience. You hate the dependence. You enjoy the price drop, you distrust the power rise, you want freedom, you want ease. You feel the fear of being locked out, you feel the greed for what the system can hand you on a silver tray. Panic makes you swear off the giants. A week later, reality pulls you back. Why? Because the trade is irresistible, because the rails are built, because your time is scarce, because the game rewards compliance. So what do? How do you respond to a system you cannot escape? 3 options. 1, accept it. Not with blind faith, with clear eyes, you take the tools, you squeeze the value, you lower your costs, you save your time. You stop pretending that purity will save you, you use what works while staying watchful. You build a life that is resilient inside the existing rails, you pick your battles, you do not fight every hill. You conserve your energy for the moments that matter. Acceptance is not surrender, it is strategy. You refuse to be naive. You refuse to be bitter. You choose to be effective. You take the efficiency on offer. You keep your mind independent. You train yourself to see the incentives, the choke points, the places where choice narrows. You teach your kids how the machine works so they do not mistake comfort for freedom, because the system is not going away. It is too efficient. It is too embedded. It is too aligned with human desires for speed, cost, and certainty. The rails hold because most of us prefer smooth rides to rough roads. You can hate that, or you can understand it. And when you understand it, you can navigate it. That is the quiet power most people overlook. Consolidation and monopoly are not glitches of advanced capitalism. They are features. They appear when scale wins, when efficiency beats sentiment. When the cheapest price and the fastest delivery break your will, use the efficiencies they offer. You already do. You click, you buy from Amazon. You search on Google, you accept the bargain. Convenience today, concentration tomorrow. Why does this happen? Because networks compound. Because capital compounds. Because the biggest players lower costs, squeeze margins, and then pull up the ladder. Do you see the pattern? You can also resist. That choice is real. Support antitrust enforcement. Not because it is easy, but because it is costly. Buy from small businesses even when it costs more, even when the website is clunky, even when delivery is slow. Use alternatives even when they are inferior. Vote for politicians who promise to break up monopolies. Understand the trade. You will make the system less efficient in exchange for less consolidation. You will feel proud at checkout and poorer at the same time. You will wait an extra day. You will accept an imperfect product. That is the price of dispersion. That is the cost of fighting concentration with your wallet. There is a third path. Understand the system and position yourself within it. If you cannot escape the machine, use its momentum. If extraction is inevitable, decide which side of the equation you will inhabit. Buy stock in the companies that dominate. Exxon, Chevron, Amazon, Google, Pfizer, JP Morgan. If the system extracts wealth from everyone and concentrates it in these firms, own these firms. You may dislike their power. You may argue with their influence, but realize where the river flows and place your cup in it. This is what Rockefeller did. While the world bought kerosene and gasoline, he owned Standard Oil. While customers lined up at the pump, he lined up the dividends. He built the pipes that defined the game and then got paid every time the game was played. You can do a smaller version of that, not his scale. But proportionally, own the extractors instead of being extracted from. This is not investment advice. This is pattern recognition. The Rockefeller system has concentrated wealth for 150 years. Why would it stop now? It is embedded in corporate law, in the tax code, in regulatory structures that sound neutral but tilt the field. Fighting it is noble, but exhausting. Escaping it is impossible. Understanding it and positioning within it is pragmatic. It is cold clarity. It is survival. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937 at age 97. He lived long enough to watch Standard Oil broken up by force. He lived long enough to watch the pieces reconsolidate by gravity. He watched the methods spread to every industry that touched scale. He watched his foundation reshape American medicine and education. He watched his grandchildren rise to the top of American finance and industry. He built a system that outlived him by a century and will outlive us all. That is legacy without romance. That is power without urgency. That is how institutions endure. What is the system? Vertical integration, own the wells, own the pipes, own the refineries. Horizontal consolidation, buy the competitors, starve the holdouts, corporate trusts that reduce rivalry. Regulatory capture that writes the rules in familiar handwriting. Philanthropic influence that grants legitimacy, access, and time. It started with Standard Oil, then steel, railroads, sugar, tobacco, later automobiles, electronics, pharmaceuticals, technology, different products. Same playbook, efficiency first, concentration next, influence forever. So choose your stance with open eyes, use it, resist it. Or understand it and position accordingly. Fear will tell you to hide. Greed will tell you to chase. Panic will tell you to sell. Discipline will tell you to see the pattern. Ask yourself a simple question. In a system that concentrates, where do you want to stand? On the outside, paying the toll, or on the inside, owning the bridge. Now it sits over every sector of the economy, a quiet pressure. A weight you feel when you buy groceries, search the web, fill a tank, or tap a card. You cannot opt out, you can only map the machine. You can only learn its logic. Rockefeller said, competition is a sin. Most people hear that and think greed. They picture a robber baron twisting his mustache. They miss the point. Rockefeller meant it almost theologically. He saw waste in duplication. Two refineries doing the same job, two rail lines fighting for the same barrel, price wars that burn cash. Factories that stand idle because pride got in the way of scale. Consolidation to him was righteous. It removed friction. It reduced chaos. It created efficiency, and with efficiency came lower prices, steadier supply, and fewer fires to put out. In his worldview, monopoly was not theft. It was the natural end state of an efficient market, not a glitch, a destination. Do you see the pattern? He did more than speak it. He built a system to enforce it. Vertical integration so you owned every step. Horizontal consolidation so you absorbed your rivals one by one. Trust to coordinate power. Influence over the rules so regulation aligned with scale. Philanthropy to shape public opinion and culture. Not a company, a method. 150 years later, we live inside that method. Amazon erases retail competition. Google erases search competition. Meta erases social media competition. Exxon, Chevron, and BP hold the oil spigot. Pfizer, Merck, and J&J anchor pharmaceuticals. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Citi define modern banking. Different names, same playbook. Look at any industry long enough, and the end state is not thousands of small rivals. It is 3 to 5 dominant players who set the standard, write the playbook, and make the margins. They can afford compliance. They can afford logistics. They can afford to wait you out. A startup enters full of fight and runs straight into distribution walls, switching costs and ad markets that price them out. Then comes the call. Partner, license, or sell. Why does this happen? Because scale simplifies. Because capital hates chaos. Because the market rewards the firm that removes redundancy, slices cost, and locks down supply. The investor sees this, even if only subconsciously. Fear whispers, if I bet on the little guy, I lose. Greed shouts, ride the winner. Panic hits when a headline says antitrust, and hands tremble on the sell button. Then the fine gets paid, the moat holds, and the giants march on. Every year, fewer companies control more share. Every year, barriers to entry rise higher. Every year, the system becomes harder to escape. Do you feel the ratchet turning? This is not Standard Oil, the company. This is the Rockefeller system, the method, and the method endures because it works. The psychology is simple but brutal. Investors chase safety in scale. They tell themselves a story about efficiency, about lower prices and better service. They ignore the soft power of default choices and locked ecosystems. They get high on smooth growth curves. They get scared by short-term volatility and sell the challengers in fear. They regret it later, then double down on the winners, late and breathless. The cycle repeats. Consumers follow similar patterns. Familiar is safe. Convenience is king. Switching feels costly, so they don't. The dominant players learn faster, ship faster, and build moats wider. Distribution beats invention. Process beats passion. The result? Consolidation looks inevitable in hindsight and irresistible in the moment. Here's the quiet truth. You cannot escape the Rockefeller system, but you can see it, and seeing it changes you. When you see the pattern, you stop mistaking noise for signal. You stop worshiping novelty and start studying structure. You ask better questions. Where does the margin actually accrue? Who owns the bottleneck? Who controls distribution? Who writes the rules? John D. Rockefeller created a method for bending markets towards scale: vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, corporate trusts, regulatory capture. Philanthropic influence. This is the modern economy. You move through it every single day. Once you see it, the map lights up. And the choices you make, what you build, where you work, how you invest, stop being random. They start being aligned with how power really compounds. This is the Rockefeller system, the method behind the world you live in. Now you can see it.